As Steve Stein mentioned yesterday, we are concluding our centennial celebration here this week. On behalf of the JCC Association Board of Directors, I am very pleased to thank our centennial supporters and sponsors, Lisa and Ron Brill, Stephen and Sharon Stein, who made leadership gifts to kick off the Centennial Fund. I also want to thank Anne and Stephen Kaufman for their generous support. Our 100th celebration would not have been possible without their personal commitments. We also want to acknowledge our honorary board member, Marvin Pertzik of St. Paul, Minnesota, who enabled JCC Association to make 22 grants to JCCs participating in the Centennial program, Making Music Happen. And other Centennial program, including the creation of our beautiful murals, could not have taken place without our sponsors, the Coca-Cola Company, the Redwoods Group, and the Israel Ministry of Tourism. The JCC movement bears the unique responsibility for serving Jews who serve in the United States Armed Forces. We were founded as the Jewish Welfare Board in 1917 to support young Jewish men, many first-generation Americans who newly arrived immigrants heading into war to proudly serve this nation. We continue to do so today through JWB, Jewish Chaplains Council, reaching 25,000 Jews, servicemen and women, along with their family members who are stationed near and far on bases as close by as Fort Knox, Kentucky, and as far away as Camp Humphreys in Korea. They are the men and women charged with defending the American freedoms we hold most dear, including the guarantee of religious freedom, which has allowed us as Jews to flourish in this great country. This honor with which we've been entrusted is a sacred one, ensuring that these brave men and women can continue to practice as Jews no matter where they serve. We proudly assist them, recently publishing a Siddur, the only one endorsed by the conservative, Orthodox, and Reform movements. We have created 5 light, easily mobile Torahs that can follow a chaplain into difficult terrain, including one sponsored by the Memphis community, and have assisted in bringing other Torahs aboard Navy ships as we did this fall on the USS Gerald Ford, We help create Shabbat in lonely places, and at Passover, when we celebrate our freedom, a chaplain is there to conduct a Seder, even for one lone service member. Our chaplains are currently in another session and could not join us for this plenary. We are truly honored that JWB is the only religious agency that had top leadership from all branches of service, Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Department of Veterans Affairs, agree to speak at this training course. It is a testament to our chaplains and the high regard in which JWB, Jewish Chaplains Council, is held by Pentagon leadership. For 100 years, the JCC movement has been linked to our chaplains, the lay leaders who serve when no chaplain is available, and the Jewish men and women who serve this nation in uniform. When you hear our next speaker, Lieutenant Commander Loretta Stein, you will see the strength of the bond when she shares with us her journey from the JCC to JWB. Dr. Stein is a physician in the United States Navy. She is originally from Allentown, Pennsylvania, where she and her family were active members of the JCC. Please welcome Lieutenant Commander Loretta Stein.
Well, good afternoon and shalom, y'all. I had to. That is something I never thought I would get the chance to say in uniform. So, well, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation to be with you here this afternoon. Again, my name is Lieutenant Commander Loretta Stein, and in case you missed it, full disclosure, I'm not a chaplain, I'm not a rabbi, I'm not a commercial airline pilot. Actually, I'm a physician. I'm an ophthalmologist by training in the United States Navy, and I'm currently stationed in Fort Belvoir Community Hospital in Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., and I've been a Jewish Welfare Board, a JWB lay leader, since 2016, when I was stationed overseas in Japan. So in the military, we like to think of everything in terms of missions and objectives. So this afternoon, I have a very important mission. My mission is to say thank you. And what I'd like to do in the next few minutes is share with you a little bit about my Jewish journey from my local JCC to being a JWB lay leader. And I'd like to thank the JCC for what it has given to me personally, and I would like to thank y'all for what y'all do every day in your local JCC, for the association, and for what you do for Jewish military members around the world through your support of the JCC's Jewish Welfare Board. All right, so as you heard, I'm from Allentown, Pennsylvania. Anybody from Allentown or Pennsylvania? All right, yeah. But when I say I grew up there and I'm from there, what I really mean is that I'm from the Allentown Jewish Community Center. And in order to show you what I mean, I need to start, at least for this crowd, it's appropriate, in the beginning, okay? So for me, in the beginning, there we go, Jewish Community School preschool, all right? We all went to Jewish communities, the JCC preschool. And then growing up, between my sisters and I think at least one of us had a birthday party at the JCC practically every year. So there's one of my birthday parties. And while I was gathering these photos, I noticed along the back wall of the birthday party room was a display of Jewish war veterans. And I thought, wow, that is some early strategic product placement by my parents. Good job. And the highlight of the year for us was the JCC Purim Festival, or as I remember it, the day I got to dress up, win a goldfish, see if you get it home before it dies. And finally, it was also at the JCC where I learned to swim, and I was on the swim team for many years, and swimming has always been an important part of my life. But between all of these experiences, it's the people that I remember the most. My friends, my neighbors, my classmates, teammates, coaches, everybody was at the JCC. That was my community. And it was this very strong sense of Jewish community that, frankly, I became accustomed to. And it's what drove me to want to help create Jewish community wherever I was. Whether that was in college at Brandeis University, anybody? Oh yeah, go Judges, yeah. Or at medical school, or in San Diego during my residency, where I met my husband at a sushi in the sukkah event, so I have to thank the JCC for him too. Thanks. And most recently, during my first tour overseas in Yokosuka, Japan. Anybody from Yokosuka? No, just kidding. Just kidding. So let me tell you a little bit about Yokosuka, or as we call it, Commander Fleet Activities Yokosuka. And here's a map showing Yokosuka in proximity to Tokyo at the entrance of the Tokyo Bay. It's home to the Navy's 7th Fleet, including the aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan, Carrier Strike Group 5, Desron Squadron 15, for a total of 3 cruisers, 7 destroyers, as well as over 50 tenant commands or support commands, including the hospital command where I worked. So we're talking about over 25,000 military members living on or around just this one base in Yokosuka. There was an interfaith chapel on base, and we had a dedicated Jewish chapel room, as well as a kosher kitchen. We did have a JWB chaplain rabbi who was stationed at the Naval Air Base at Sugi, a few hours away, and he came down for occasional Shabbats, holidays, and special events. We held Shabbat every Friday night. Actually, when I first got there, it was held every other Friday night, but we became so close that we decided that we wanted to be together every week. We celebrated all year long together. Here's our Hanukkah celebration. We hosted a Passover Seder for over 50 people, Jewish, non-Jewish, all were welcome. We had a bris, we had a bar mitzvah, we had a number of children learning Jewish holidays and customs. So So what I want you to understand is that this is what military life overseas looks like, at least in some places. You may have seen some photos of service members lighting Shabbat candles or having a Seder on a ship or while deployed, but there are also entire families living overseas, all over the world. Babies being born, kids growing and learning, bar and bat mitzvahs being had, service members getting married. And in Yokosuka, we were a very small community, but I have to say it was one of the most vibrant and caring communities I have ever been a part of. So after 2 years in Yokosuka, I got orders to Fort Belvoir in Virginia, where we have a very well-established Jewish community on base, led mainly by local retirees, along with a JWB chaplain rabbi assigned to a unit in the area. And since I've been stationed in DC, I've had a number of unique opportunities associated with being a JWB lay leader. So for example, I was invited to light Hanukkah candles with Speaker Paul Ryan, and I guess we're not doing that next year. I also had the opportunity to attend a Martin Luther King Interfaith Shabbat at Washington Hebrew Congregation with over 20 religious leaders of all faiths across DC. And I got really lucky. Our rabbi from Japan just happened to get orders to the Naval Academy in nearby Annapolis and was able to swing by to officiate my wedding in January. Thanks. Thank you. So that has been my journey so far, and I'm so grateful for all of the fond memories that I had growing up at the Allentown JCC, and more importantly, the sense of Jewish community that it instilled in me. And I'm also very grateful to have the privilege of being part of the JCC organization once more through the JWB. This year's biennial theme is Strengthening the New Jewish Community, and its description of our meeting on the JCC website reads as follows. As we enter our second century together, we need to embrace overlapping communities whose connections to Jewish life are not so clear-cut, and who find meaningful identity in being intermarried, or LGBTQ, or disabled, or not Jewish, or part of wider local communities, and I would add, or being Jewish in the military. And then it asks us the following. What are the questions we need to ask and to answer about the future of our community? Who do we want to connect with, and who wants to connect with us, and how can we make that happen? I can tell you that Jewish military members want to connect their dots with the JWB and with you. I ask that you think of Jewish military members as part of this new Jewish community, a community without walls, without borders. And finally, when you're building relationships and collaborations, I ask that you continue to remember our Jewish service members and their families, who I'm so very proud to serve as a JWB lay leader. Thank you.
Please welcome Lisa Brill, Chair of JCC Association's Centennial Celebration.
Hi. All right, so always when I'm ready to speak, my prayer is to follow a really boring presenter. Loretta kind of sucks. Sorry. Oh, that way. But I do want to thank you, Loretta, for helping us tie together 100 years of this JCC movement. As our town square began with the Jews in the military in 1917, so must we continue to celebrate all those who serve and to think about them and keep them in our vision as we build and plan for our community of the future. So many people have asked me already, weren't you at the last biennial talking about the centennial? How long is the centennial? And I was, but then we were kind of talking about the planning of the centennial, and then we kind of extended it because we had an 18-month centennial celebration. And now I just wanted to share some of that with you. I first want to thank anybody who has served and everybody who has served on the Centennial Committee through the many years that we have served. And to especially thank Robin Balin and her amazing staff for leading the way and making it always such a fun partnership. Thank you. Now, I'd just like to share a few of the highlights with you of our year-and-a-half-long celebration. So hopefully you've seen outside in the foyer, right outside the doors, and on our website, because I know all of you have all checked our website, the beautiful timelines that depict the visual stories of the JCC movement's history. Please take a minute to look if you haven't, because you may surprise yourself. You may see people from your community, you may see your JCC, and you might see someone you know from back in the day. We also inspired some JCCs to create their own timelines. So this one is from the Meyerson JCC in Cincinnati, and their community poured over thousands of photos as a community project to create this timeline celebrating 85 years of their Jewish community. We all know that life is about stories. We have created a mosaic of written and video stories online that express the face-to-face connections that built our community. 22 JCCs created amazing musical programs and events through our centennial program, Making Music Happen, the soundtrack of Jewish life in North America, which was made possible, I want to say again, by a grant from our dear continuing board member, Marvin J. Pertzik, and the Mary Livingston Griggs and Mary Griggs Burke Foundation. It was really a celebration of music and culture and arts, of which we can be, and I hope they are very proud. Over 10,000 people at 30 JCCs participated in our 100 Days of Fitness last summer, which will now become an annual event and program from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So if you're not in one of those 30 JCCs, get on board. You can still do it. We can always extend the centennial a little bit longer, so at the next biennial I can report how many there will be. Our JCC camps participated in 100 acts of kindness, something again that we can hopefully continue for at least the next 100 years. The JWB Jewish chaplains went digital at #GoAboveAndBeyond with programs to show support for our veterans during the week of Veterans Day. And 2 years ago, hundreds of Jewish lay leaders and professionals created these magnificent banners at the Biennial in Baltimore with our artist in residence, Jay Schlossberg, Wolf Cohn. We are all about relationships, 10 decades, and we are stronger for the relationships we have built together. That's what builds our strong communities. One of the relationships for which we are most proud has been going on for just about 1/3 of our 100-year history. We are so grateful for our centennial sponsorship and our partner of 29 years, the Coca-Cola Company. Yes. I am delighted to invite my friend, a great friend of the JCCA and the Marcus Jewish Community of Atlanta, Becki Cedrone, to come up. She is Director of Community Marketing at Coca-Cola, and I'd love her to come up and say a few words to y'all.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, these are two tough acts to follow now because I'm not funny and I'm not in uniform. So we've got some serious problems here. Anyways, let me see here. So as Lisa had alluded to, I am in the community marketing department of Coca-Cola, and everyone's kind of like, what does that mean? So we sit within a very unique space of our organization, and it's just that. It's community marketing, and it's focused on the community aspect of our business. And it's less about our brands and more about the partners that we have and the long-standing philanthropic partners that we have the benefit of working with every day. And so in many cases in our areas of business, it's always, what are we getting for an ROI? What are the brands getting? And in this space, we don't do that. So we look at what are we driving for our partners' mission and what are we helping them achieve through our brands. So it's very unique in that perspective. So I'm happy to sit in this space, and I'm even more happy to work with Jordan and Randy on an ongoing basis with the JCC Association. So as I said, our mission for the last 130 years is to refresh the world, create moments of optimism and happiness. And I think we do that really from a global perspective across our organization, but we also have our bottlers in the local communities where we look to touch and make an impact at those local levels. And so everything comes down to how healthy are our communities. If our communities aren't healthy, then we have an issue, and we need to look at what we're doing within the community and how we can make that impact at the community level. So it's really about the communities and the organizations that we partner with on a day-to-day basis. As you can see here, these two quotes are kind of really explain who we are as an organization. Roberto Gonzueta is a former CEO of the organization back in the 80s and 90s. As he says here, we in business do have a calling. We have a calling to build something lasting and good. And that is exactly who we are as an organization. Our most recent CEO is the quote on the bottom, and it's, "We have an opportunity, to my mind, a responsibility to act as a catalyst for positive change around the world." And as, you know, again, this really speaks to who we are, and I think even more importantly, where I sit within community marketing and what we do every day. So I think, you know, when someone asks, you know, why Jewish community centers and JCCA, and I think, you know, as I said, you know, our partnerships are really about, you know, how can we look at it from a national perspective? And so it's the, you know, JCC Association, and then how can we take that down to the local community level? And it's through our partnership and our support of the JCC Maccabi Games and Arts Fest at the local level, and what we can do at that local level to really touch the community and make a difference and make an impact. And so I think that's where this is the perfect partnership, because it allows us to leverage both areas within our organization and bring the brand to life at the community level. The other thing, we have a strong synergy around the purpose-driven organizations. I think that's twofold from both of our organizations' standpoint. We're really looking at how can we drive impact at the local level, and I think, you know, JCC Association and all of you in the room are also doing the same thing, and that's why our partnership makes such perfect sense from that perspective. The other way that we bring our partnership to life is through JCC Cares, and I think you know, it's wonderful to see some of the impact that JCC Cares does at the community level, and the giving back, you know, specifically at each of the communities that the teens do. I think it's really centered around repairing the world and community service projects and giving back to the community. And again, JCC Cares does such a phenomenal work from that perspective, and it's really about empowering the next generation to leave the world a better place. And so through our support of JCC Cares, that's what we do. And so I really think that there's these, you know, these areas within our partnership that make perfect sense and really bring our mission to life, and more importantly, our partnership to life. And so I thank you every day for the partnership. I thank Randy and Jordan as well. And I look forward to meeting some of you in the next couple of days and sharing a Coke with you as well. So thank you.
Please welcome Doron Krakow, President and CEO of JCC Association, Lisa Eisen, Vice President of the Schusterman Foundation, and Barry Finestone, CEO of the Jim Joseph Foundation.
Turned out not. First of all, Becki, I wanted to tell you that on behalf of JCC Association and the JCCs of North America, we are deeply honored that the Coca-Cola Company has seen fit to be a long-standing and sustained partner and sponsor of ours, and we're very proud to bask in the glow of the wonderful work and the magnificent brand of Coca-Cola. Thank you very much. So our panelists today were not, unfortunately, able to be here at the very beginning of the biennial because of prior travel commitments, and you should know that we have been welcomed incredibly warmly and graciously by the Memphis Jewish community and by our host committee, and I'm going to encourage the audience to be kind in this regard, because my first question for you is, what does it feel like to walk into a conference like this representing entities that are of absolutely no interest to anybody in the room.
Feels like our job every single day of the week.
We're thrilled that you're here. We are honored to have you as part of this conference, and it's possible that one or two people here will be interested in currying favor with you as time goes by. Clearly, I'm not among them. It's been nice working for the JCC Association. Two of the three of us here are relatively new to our jobs, and the identification and preparation of executives for C-suite responsibilities across the field has become an increasing focus for both of your foundations. You have been major investors and contributors to Leading Edge. Let's begin, if we can, if you could tell us a little bit about why that has become a priority and what you foresee in terms of the evolution of that particular pursuit.
Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I just have to thank you all for welcoming us here. I have to thank Doron for many months ago having the foresight to invite the two of us to join this august audience. But I have to do my bona fides with the JCCA movement before I answer the question, if that's okay. Because my life, just like Loretta's life, began and was formed at the JCC of Louisville, Kentucky. Yay. I also learned how to swim there. My first two jobs were there. I think, unlike Loretta, was a cheerleader for the basketball team through AZA and BBG. I really grew up at the JCC in Louisville, and I saw Sarah Wagner, and I want to shout out Sarah and all the Louisvillians here for helping shape who I am as a person today. And I also want to thank Michael Finestone and all the folks from the JCC of Greater Washington, because my children similarly were shaped by their life at camp and preschool and lessons in every possible topic from karate to art at the JCC in Rockville. So thank you to both of those communities for making me and my family who we are. In terms of the Leading Edge grant, I would say two things about it. One, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, is that I think, like the Jim Joseph Foundation, the Schusterman Foundation likes to fund strategically through platforms that can affect change throughout the field. And we see Leading Edge as a place that is focused on creating great talent and great leadership across the entire Jewish community and leveraging assets that can benefit everyone. And we really believe that the most important investment we can make, and I think it's the most important investment the JCC movement can make, is in its professionals and in the talent who will actually be the face of the Jewish community, who are shaping the Jewish community, who are shaping the customer experience, who are leading change at a complex time. And so we have made some major investments in talent, career development, leadership. In addition to our work with Leading Edge, we are also run the Schusterman Fellowship and other programs that are about investing in current and future leadership of Jewish life. It's the people who make the difference, and people really need to be at the center.
Perfect. Barry, anything you want to add?
Yeah, well, just also thank you for having me, and it's great to be, feels like a little bit like welcome home in some respects. It's great to be back at a biennial, and you know, the movement is in a very, very unique place to take a significant leadership position in the North American Jewish community, and it just feels a real privilege to be here with all of you right now. I think I'd echo Lisa's comments and also say that, you know, the trouble with every great idea is that it requires hard work and leadership to get it done. And you know, when I arrived at the foundation about 18 months ago, it was the first dial that we decided to turn, was to really kind of turn up the leadership piece of the puzzle. And I just want to spend 30 seconds just saying that for leadership, it's not just about C-suite. It's actually, and it's one of the reasons why the grant to Leading Edge was an important one for us, it's really about all facets of leadership. It's about understanding the pipeline. How do people come into the Jewish world? It's understanding how do people actually move up the ladder and actually get to the C-suite positions. It's about lay leaders and how do we actually train lay leaders to be the best that they can possibly be. And really, I think the word that I would use is, we have some great leadership in the North American Jewish community. I would say that not much of it has been particularly intentional. It has been by happenstance. And with that happenstance, we've seen enormously amazing results. But if we could be a bit more intentional about it, then I think the opportunity for significant growth in the North American Jewish community, really has, limitless potential.
That's terrific. As a relative newcomer to my role, I had the great good fortune to spend time with Gali Cooks early on to learn more about what Leading Edge is involved in, and JCC Association very proudly joined a growing roster of JCCs around the continent to participate in the staff assessment and evaluation process. We look forward to being increasingly invested in that as time goes by, so we're grateful for the investment that you're making there. I appreciated the fact that you've opened essentially by relating to the enormous opportunity that lies before us as a movement, before JCC Association in the field. Yesterday, we were repeating the number, I was repeating the number over and over again, of 1.5 million people passing through the doors of JCCs every week. You have spent an enormous amount of time and energy looking at the landscape of North American Jewish life. Tell us what you see.
I'll take a crack. If you have to think. I had the privilege of being with the Estelea Ritz leadership group, over lunch, and I said, there's an awful lot of, it feels like we're always browbeating ourselves and banging in our chest like it's Yom Kippur. In the Jewish world, and there is so much going on, and there is so much good going on, and so much amazing work that is going on. So I'll say that, and I will also say that we find a very fragmented Jewish community. We find a Jewish community that is increasingly in different places trying to make Shabbos for themselves. We see not an awful lot of coordination. And by the way, I want to be really clear and honest here. I think an awful lot of that is partly on our shoulders. Right? And by ours, I mean the funding, the funding world, where we've created this kind of weird labyrinth of funding that makes it very difficult to stop doing programs. We're going to have to kill some darlings in order to keep on moving ahead and create room for new things. So on one level, I think that's a community that we see, and we also see, I think we see a community that is still stuck in some very traditional paradigms that everybody wants to break out of, but it is increasingly hard to do. And then the last thing I would just say is that, for Lisa talked about it for a second, I just want to be clear, for us, and I think it relates to the association, we are not staffed, nor do we have any type of ability to understand whether or not we should be funding in this JCC versus that JCC. I would say the same thing in the federated movement. I would say the same thing in the summer camping movement. We just can't operate like that. We don't know if the work in San Francisco is any better or worse than the work in Atlanta or in Louisville or anywhere else. So for us, we need strong intermediaries. We need an organization like the Foundation for Jewish Camp to be able to give money to, so that they can have the expertise to understand what to grow and what to build. And I think it's fair to say that we do see an opportunity for the association to play that role as a strong intermediary. And Leading Edge, the organization that Doron referred to, is an example. There are plenty of people playing in the leadership space, but we wanted to see whether or not there could be a vessel created that could hold leadership writ large.
Thank you, Barry.
We spend a lot of time looking at the landscape of American Jewish life, and I would say it's the proverbial best of times, worst of times. I like to focus on the best. I'm an optimist, and I think that there are tremendous resources, a lot of creativity out there, new kinds of forms of engagement. And there's also a fractured environment, and there's a distrust of institutions, and clearly our community is divided politically and ideologically and religiously. But to me, the challenge and the opportunity are the same, and that is that the Jewish community is incredibly, incredibly diverse. Just a couple statistics, 80% is the percent of non-Orthodox Jews marrying people from other faiths and backgrounds, 20% of Jews living with disabilities, 10% of the American Jewish population that identifies as Jews of color, and that goes up to 20% on college campuses. 7% is a conservative estimate of the number of LGBTQ Jews. So we're a very, very diverse community, and I would venture to say that if we were going to start tabula rasa right now and rebuild, build a infrastructure for the community as it is today, it would look very different than what we have. And I think we need to look at our diversity as our strength. We're a very rich tapestry, a mosaic of Jewish life, as you've said, and while there are many, many Jews who actually don't identify with the religion, it's 22%, 32% among millennials, they still are looking for meaning and purpose and belonging and community. And that positions the JCCA movement very, very well, because you're a place of belonging as opposed to necessarily a place of belief. So I think for too long we've been focused on the fear and the guilt and the draining our cups about all the problems. And it's time to have a new narrative and a new framework that focuses on the positive values that Judaism brings to the world, that focuses on all the both particular and universal values that Judaism has brought to the world, justice and charity and learning and community. And the JCCs, I think, can be a standard bearer of that in terms of expressing those values in real ways to the people in the Jewish world and also to the people who aren't Jewish, who are coming through the doors every day and out into the world. So I think reframing Jewish life as a positive that enriches all of us and enriches the world is the great challenge and opportunity ahead of us.
Terrific, thank you. I'm going to sidebar for 1 second because for everybody who participated in the morning plenary, you know that when Gil Troy announced it was time for questions, I think it took the entire audience by surprise. And for the first time in my life, I was in a room with 600 Jews who had nothing to say. So forewarned is forearmed. We're going to open to questions towards the tail end of this session if anybody wants to begin to prepare anything that you may want to ask when the time comes. Lisa, I want to come back to where you finished. If this is indeed a golden age for Jewish life in terms of access and opportunity and achievement and the modern state of Israel and all of those things, replete with the challenges that we're facing, then I think it's fair to look at the things that need doing as opportunities to capitalize on the golden age. When you look at the challenges, or in this vein, opportunities to do better, what's the low-hanging fruit that you see? Where should we be focusing time, energy, and attention?
We as a community, or we as the JCC movement?
We as a community, and as the representation of it, we as a JCC movement.
Right. Well, I think it builds on what I said before, that we have an opportunity to look at our tradition and look at our values and reframe and reposition who we are as a people and what we're offering to the world. And I think there's no better place than the JCCs and the JCCA to do that. It's literally where the Jews are, and it's also where we're most proximate with members of other communities. I learned from you, 1.5 million people walking through the door every week, 1 million Jewish, 500,000 not. This is a place where we can redefine what does it mean to create a family and children with character, to create healthy families, to create strong communities that are places of purpose and meaning and of giving back to the world as Jews. I think, we hear so much about anti-Semitism and BDS and anti-Israel, and that's all important that we address that. But what we're not hearing about are what are the Jewish values that define us and that can give us purpose for this modern moment of complexity and fragmentation. And I see I see the JCCs as sort of a modern town square in Jewish life. Like I said, I lived at the JCC, everything happened there. And I think, again, today, important conversations can happen in this town square, both among the community and between Jews and those who are different backgrounds and faiths. It can be a coming together and a redefining of how do we find purpose in this world? How do we be of service to others? And one of the things I talk about a lot is just the extremism on every side that is just drowning out the conversation in the center. And the center, the JCC, the Jewish Community Center, can actually provide that center for Jewish life to bring people together across all kinds of different lines of difference and create some common ground and place people in relationship with each other. And show that what it means to be Jewish is to be welcoming and to be accessible and to be diverse, and that's our strength.
Thank you. Barry, not so very long ago, you were sitting in an audience at a biennial as the executive of one of the great JCCs in the country in San Francisco, California. Some years later, you're sitting at one of the great Jewish foundations on the continent. Tell me a little bit about the different vantage point on your former place of employment and the viewpoint on the JCC system sitting where you are today.
Yeah, thank you. So I got a couple of things I want to say, and I also just want to jump in a little bit on the question to Lisa. I just want to be clear that the vantage point is completely different. What moving over to the funder side has made me realize is, just how much hard work it takes on the other side. And I don't want to get lost on that. And I know that the biennial is 80%, lay leadership and accompanied by some of the key professionals. It is so hard running an organization and working in an organization to operate something where channels have to be gone through for major decision making, where people are constantly having to politic, constantly having to raise money, constantly having to put out fires. And the big difference, and I will say that I try to run the JCC of San Francisco, giving my time to think about new ideas, and I think we did a relatively good job of it. But the great vantage point that the foundation world has is I actually have time to think. I actually have time to actually sit and read documents, read articles, understand. I'll be honest with you. I remember when I first moved to the foundation. I moved to a different foundation before that one, and I got a big document we funded in the area of child psychiatry in the previous foundation. And I got this big document from the NIH about child psychiatry that I had to read before I went to Washington, D.C. for a meeting. And I found myself having time to read it. Now, if I had been at the JCC, I would have, turned around to my marketing comms person like a couple of hours before and say, hey, where's my executive summary? Because I was busy, worrying about, whatever was going on that day. We have to shift that. We have to fundamentally change that dynamic so that the notion of thinking becomes, which by the way is hard because it's a long-term outcome, and we're all about metrics and all about outcomes, and we've got to get rid of that mentality. And we actually have to give people time to think, because any of the, not necessarily good ideas, but some of the thoughts that we may have at the foundation, it's because we have time to think about it. So then I think to myself, well, what would happen if we have all our Jewish professionals around the country who actually have time to think about stuff? But we don't. And that is a fundamental, a fundamental shift and a big change in my life. I wanted to also just touch on the question that you asked, Lisa, because I think it's somewhat related. I think there are a couple of significant opportunities that I see that we have to just kind of jump the shark a little bit. The first thing is that the Jewish world is constantly reacting to problems. And we're really, really good at reacting to problems. And I don't have the answer to this. I have some thoughts about it. But we actually have to, what would it look like if we were proactive? What would it look like if we actually could see into the future a little bit and actually begin to position ourselves? That to me is something, is something that we don't do. And then I think Lisa touched on it beautifully. The Jewish world, we have our problems, and anti-Semitism is real. And my family, we have a freshman on college campus, and she knows what it's like at Barnard dealing with BDS. It's all there. But I will say the Jewish world of North America is still way too focused on survival. And I'm much more interested in what a world looks like where Jews are thriving. And I said the same thing to the Esther Leah Ritz group. Survival is a very, very low threshold. Survival is what, people who don't have enough food, for the homeless woman on the street trying to feed her family, that's about real issues of survival, right? We're by and large past that. And by the way, if there are Jews out there, we should be helping them, and non-Jews. But let's think about, let's kind of increase the appetite a little bit. The ambition to survive seems to be no longer necessary in exactly the same way. And JCCs are all about thriving, whether it's in your mind or your body or your spirit. And then the last thing I just wanted to say, and again, I'm sorry for the Leah Ritz people, they heard this. I'm seeing a very disturbing trend. I go to the same Starbucks every single morning to grab a cup of coffee. And for the last year and a half, I've waited in line to get my Starbucks with about 9 or 10 people. And you know what I've noticed in the last 2-3 months is, and in the last week for sure, there's no line when I walk in. And it's not because Starbucks isn't any less busy, but it's because people are ordering on their app and they're going to pick up their drink. So it's very possible every morning of the week that I could drive my car to the ferry, get on a boat with 500 people, go and walk half a mile, go grab a cup of coffee, and never talk to a soul. And that lack of connection is causing a mental health disease in our country and in our young people. And it seems to me that of all the institutions in the country that are best designed where people are actually talking to one another are JCCs. That's about thriving. That's about actually living connected lives.
So Barry, you've already done me two good turns this morning, because I'm not the only one that apologized to the Esther Leah Ritz fellows that they were going to have to hear the same material in a plenary that they heard when we met with them privately. And you've reminded me that the comfort and confidence that comes from working as a funder means that you can lose the jacket and tie and wear a striking sweatshirt to the plenary program. And
for the record, this is what I wore the last time I was at a biennial. So my goal in life is to help the Jewish people thrive and get rid of the formality of Jewish life. So.
Yes. Yes. Lisa, over the last number of weeks, we have been contending increasingly with an evolving challenge that is confronting, I think, North American society in general, and we have come to realize that we as an organized Jewish community are not immune from it. Issues that relate to the provision of a safe, respectful, and equitable workplace. I was greatly encouraged when I came into the role to find myself beginning a conversation with you that has continued now over a number of months about the leadership role that the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Foundation is taking around this issue. And I wonder if you could give us some broad perspective on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and where we are with the progress.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about it. This is why I actually don't have time to read. I'm running around trying to build a partnership in close partnership with Barry and the Jim Joseph Foundation, as well as with a variety of organizations and foundations and experts in the space. And we're hoping to just model collaboration and collective impact to change our community, to make it a place where everyone feels safe, everyone feels respected, and everyone feels like they're treated equitably. Clearly, this is coming from the Me Too movement, though I will say that we started our work before the Time's Up movement. We actually envisioned a model that then came out publicly with Time's Up. And our goal is to have leaders and organizations and really the community as a whole make a commitment that their workplaces and the communal spaces that they create will be free of sexual harassment, free of gender discrimination, and places that everyone feels good and safe being a part of. Unfortunately, our community, as you've seen in the press, is not immune to these challenges that have come out in the broader world, in Hollywood and business and journalism. We have our own cases, and we cannot tolerate a community where it's okay to harass or worse, assault someone as part of their work environment. And we need to make sure that all people feel that they can come to work with the expectation that they will be respected and that their basic human dignity and who they are as a person will be upheld, B'Tselem Elohim. And so what we're doing right now is putting together a commitment with standards that have been well researched with partners at the EEOC and experts across the field that we're going to be asking organizations and leaders to commit to, and not a pledge that can be just sort of checked off, check the box and we're done, but actually a real commitment where they're agreeing to change the culture of their organizations, update their policies and procedures, provide real education and training to their staff and to their boards, and just make it clear that an environment of harassment and inequity will no longer be acceptable in Jewish life. We have about close to 40 organizations that have signed on as the leadership of this initiative, and we're getting ready to launch the commitment in the coming weeks, and we will be asking major organizations and associations in Jewish life to join us. And we encourage all of you at the local level and at the national level to be part of making the Jewish community a place where talented people, whether volunteers or staff or consumers, feel great coming every single day.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I am pleased and proud on behalf of the JCC Association of North America, representing 6,000 full-time and 32,000 part-time and seasonal employees, to announce that we have committed ourselves to become a stewarding partner in the Safe, Respectful, and Equitable Initiative. And similarly proud to announce that Joy Brand Richardson will be the senior professional representing us in the leadership circle.
Thank you so much for joining, and it's obvious with this many staff and this many lay leaders that you are an indispensable partner to the work, and again can be a model for our community. So on behalf of all of us, we really thank you for that.
It's our privilege, and we look forward to keeping the entire field informed of unfolding timetables and evolution, what you can anticipate in the way of resources and insights and programs that are going to emerge from this. I think it's going to be a terrific period of discovery for us. And I think thanks to your leadership, we can look forward to an organized Jewish world that takes its responsibility to live up to the values and ethics that undergird the nature of who we are as a community and as a people. So thank you again very much for that. I want to shift gears a little bit. We had been talking about the opportunities that are required for the JCC movement to see itself as an engine for research and development about how we're going to become an increasingly evolved and high quality and engaged platform on which people can become part of this town square that we've been talking about in greater and greater numbers. From everything that I learned when I was a business school student, research and development is predicated on the notion of trial and error. And yet those of us who go with great anticipation to the halls of major foundations and philanthropic enterprises expect to bat close to 1,000 on our projects if we hope to get funding or to have funding renewed. Help us understand the viewpoint of mega foundations that you represent with regard to the kind of trial and error that will be necessary to find the new ways of doing business that may define the next generation of our work.
Sure. So I'm just going to take 20 seconds. just on the last topic, which we are proud to be partners of, if you want to know what leadership looks like, it's right there. And she's going to kill me after this, right? But I just want to say, really, the hardest thing to do is to push a boat out of the port, to get it out. And then once it's off to sea, everybody does their job and starts to navigate it. And that's kind of where we are now. Lisa's taken on 2 full-time jobs, vice president of the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Foundation, and this corralling effort of herding those of the initial group of people together. So it's just a tremendous piece of work. So thank you. And by the way, we would solve all the leadership issues in the Jewish community if we can solve this. 75% of the people that work in the Jewish community are women, and 25% of the men are men. But when you go to the C-suite positions, it's completely the other way around. So if this issue can be solved, where it's fair and safe and equitable and everything, then we've gone a long way to solving all sorts of leadership issues. And it will be solved. It'll take time, but it'll be solved. So the R&D thing is a fascinating conversation, and again, we talked about this a little while ago. I think that philanthropy, for really just good reasons, and it's a lot to do with the stewardship of significant dollars, has really wanted to bet on sure things. Right? So it's kind of like, let's test it a little bit, and if it works, we're in, and it's all good. And I think while there's obviously room for that, I think it's fundamentally, parts of it are flawed when trying to really begin to think about the future and to really understand R&D. So from our side of it, we're not quite there yet. We're only a couple of months away, but we're going to be reshaping how we do this with the recognition that actually, success will partly be measured by how many times you fail. And to be honest with you, in order for us as the funder to do that with you, we actually have to learn the muscle ourselves, right? So we have to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk. This isn't about, and the foundation world is not, is not like that. So what's going to happen in our foundation over the course of the next several months is we're going to be unveiling a strategy where we're going to be doing some of our own learning and working with some partners. And I want to be clear, it's less about trying to figure out what the next big idea is, because the next big idea will just be a byproduct of this work. It's actually about seeding in organizations R&D as a developmental part of your DNA. It actually is built in. I remember when I was here a few years ago and I made the J talk about putting the J back in the JCC, and I described the notion that when I got to San Francisco, the way it worked was that we would if somebody would build a program and then right at the end somebody would say, oh, we're a JCC, so let's sprinkle a little Jewish on top of it, right? Well, you can't do it that way. It has to be embedded in there. So the goal of our R&D efforts are really about trying to encourage the association, other organizations, individual JCCs, to really actually be thinking about R&D as part of your work. Take a leaf out of somebody's book, spend a day a week doing it, going to retreats, reading, learning about it. But just to sit and think about ideas, that's not R&D. Mm-hmm. R&D is actually, it actually requires real research. It requires the development of ideas. It requires quick starts, quick fails. It requires scaling for things that work. But that's a mentality. It's not just an exercise. It actually needs to get built in. And for some reason, which I have my own theory about it, but it doesn't matter, for some reason, Jewish community doesn't play like that. We're trying to solve tomorrow's problems with yesterday's infrastructure. And if your JCCs are looking exactly what they do like now 5 years from now, they will not be in a good place. And we want to give some dollars to help there.
Lisa, Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs actually dealt with the variation on this issue. And in a final conversation we had with Jobs in an epilogue of his book, Jobs talked about the distinction between companies that were run by marketing and sales leaders determined to give the customer what they want in order to drive sales and profitability, and innovative companies headed by ideas people whose determination it was to come up with something that the customer never could possibly imagine and then couldn't live without. We live in a peculiar juxtaposition, professional juxtaposition of major funders interested in innovation and sales and marketing professionals interested in fundraising, feeling that we are greatly at risk if our batting average is not high enough. How do you, from the position of a mega foundation, help us to perform in a way that would allow us to be more the entrepreneur and innovator and less the sales and marketing people?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, I'm going to take my revenge now and not wait till we get outside the room. It has been amazing to have Barry join the Jewish philanthropic world, and as you can hear, he is one of the most innovative, expansive, entrepreneurial thinkers in the Jewish community, and it has just been a total breath of fresh air to have him join what too often, as he said, is sort of a stilted, results-driven, data-driven approach. He is data-driven, but he's very creative and expansive in his thinking, and I definitely on the Steve Jobs side of the equation, so let's give him a... I want to say that I feel very fortunate because the family that I work for made their fortune in the energy business, in oil and gas, and Charles Schusterman used to always say, "I am not afraid to drill dry holes." And he knew that anything that was worth doing was going to involve risk, and it was going to involve innovation, and it, by definition, had to involve failure. And his wife, Lynn, who survived him and ran the foundation for many years, almost 80 years old, is a huge risk taker, more and more so with every year of her life. And now their daughter, Stacy, who is taking over the foundation, very much in that tradition, and incredibly has a file that she keeps called My Failures. And she tracks all the things she tried and where she failed and the lessons learned from that. And I think they are models for what it takes to really look beyond the corner and to be creative and to be bold and courageous, and to look at what do we want the future to look like and then create it. It's difficult when you are running an organization, as Barry said. It is so hard. I used to be a nonprofit leader. You're always looking for resources and managing your staff and all the day-to-day demands, and it is hard to balance both of those things. But I think we have a responsibility as representatives of mega Jewish philanthropy to give you the space to try new things. And just going back to the role that I think JCCA can play as an intermediary for the entire field, you're a huge distribution channel. This movement is a huge distribution channel, and we fund through national platforms and global platforms. We've helped reinvent BBYO as a global movement, Hillel as a global movement, Moishe House as a global movement, and others. And I think JCCA can play a similar role of helping make the movement relevant to today's challenges and looking ahead to what the community should look like, what does it need, and giving you, some risk capital and some room to try new things. I want to actually shout out here Barak Herman from Baltimore, JCC. I can't see you, but I know you're in the room somewhere. We had a very exciting conversation about some of the things he's trying in Baltimore. For example, partnering with hospitals and wellness centers to make JCC Baltimore a center for wellness and health, not only in the building, but also satellite, all outside around the community. And I think that's the kind of bold thinking about how do we create really creative partnerships with Coca-Cola and with others that will affect our brand. Barry and I have talked about what could it be like to bring centers of service and social action throughout the JCC world in partnership with organizations like Repair the World and make, like I said, a standard bearer of those kind of values. So I think that creative partnerships, creative thinking, looking ahead, and again, putting people at the center of the work and letting them try and fail and hopefully then learn the lessons and succeed. That is a role that we can play in giving that flexibility.
Thank you.
I just want to add for 30 seconds, because it's practical and to the point. So we're working with a grantee right now, a very high-performing grantee in our opinion, who is up for renewal. So they've presented, and we're going to talk about it, and they'll come to our board meeting in a few months' time. But the structure of the grant is going to be something far different than we've ever done before, where we recognize, look, we can't just shift everything to R&D. There's you've got a big organization, you got to have general operating support. So what we will probably end up doing is we will bring a grant for general operating support that will allow them to, do their work and continue to reach the thousands of people that they reach every year. And we're also probably going to say to them, and we've got this sum of money, think of it as like a line of credit that we're going to hold. It's earmarked with your name on it. If you take it, you never have to pay it back, and there's no interest. That's where it's different than a line of credit. But it allows them to say to themselves, when they do have some thoughts, that the money's right here, right? And they could just say, you know what, we want to test this, and here's $50,000, here's $150,000. Because what happens, one of the reasons why ideas don't get generated and R&D doesn't get thought of, is because once you think of the idea inside the community, here's what's got to happen. I got to run it through a committee. Well, we'll create this subcommittee of that committee, right? And then we'll go and fundraise for it when we've actually got it down. And by the time that's 6-9 months from now, right? It's exactly the opposite. And I am not one to suggest that that we need to do everything in the for-profit world into the not-for-profit world. They're two different worlds. But there are lessons that one can learn from the other. By the way, I think both ways. I think the Coca-Cola discussion was clearly a mission-driven organization that is learned from not-for-profit speak, so to speak. So it goes both ways. But there are practical ways. This isn't just up in the air that I think philanthropy can make it easier to be trying things.
So before I open up the floor, so get ready if those of you who are accumulating questions. Let me ask one more question of you, Lisa. There's a lot of people in this room who would love to know how something that they hope and dream to be able to do in their JCCs can get on the radar of the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Foundation, and how once a notion somehow finds its way through the door, decisions are made about what, when, and how to commit resources and energy.
Well, I first of all, I want to echo something that Barry said before, which is we have no way of knowing one JCC from the other, what is the best. And so the way we would fund, I think, this movement, should that happen, is that we would do it through the JCCA, and we would look for bold, new, creative ideas where resources could be funneled through the center, but to the benefit across the entire system. That may be on a specific issue area. We are, you heard me say, deeply committed to service and social justice and Tikkun Olam. We are deeply committed to Israel education and engagement, and many other issues. And so having that sort of platform that could accrue to the benefit of the entire field would be one way that we would approach it. We don't take unsolicited proposals. Our staff really goes out and looks at the fields in which we work, and looks for gaps, and looks for opportunities, and looks for good partners, both from a philanthropic point of view, and you're looking at our best partner here from a philanthropic point of view, but also organizational partners. And then we make recommendations to our board based on what our strategy is and the sense of alignment and opportunity that we see. So we're not sort of a reactive foundation. We're much more of a strategic foundation. And the thing that I would say is that if you have an idea that you think could be piloted locally, but that could accrue to the benefit of the entire system, and your JCC could be sort of a demonstration site, that would be one way to think about accessing resources. And to partner across the entire JCC ecosystem with what can we learn from each other that would bubble up to create an idea that would be, get the attention of a foundation like ours or some of the other big foundations that are funding the future of Jewish life in North America.
Thank you. At the risk of dating myself here, since you've already done the jump the shark Happy Days reference, that was sort of like the E.F. Hutton moment when I asked that question to Lisa. Every head in the room was kind of... So let's open up to the floor. I can't see a thing from here except the confidence monitor, which is saying, by the way, you guys are doing a really good job.
Hi, my name is Candace Manriquez. I'm an incoming board member at the Tucson JCC in Arizona. Okay, I am a communication professor, and one of the things that I teach is about interpersonal conflict, and two things that cause interpersonal conflict are two scarce rewards that we have: time and money. As an incoming board member, one of the things that I'm really curious about from a practical standpoint, if I have this, what I think to be a really innovative idea, what kind of strategies can our JCCs be implementing to encourage, lay leaders to come and say, hey, give us your ideas, we have the time, and we potentially have the money. I've heard a couple of ideas in some breakout sessions. There's some JCCs doing like some Shark Tank type things, trying to encourage innovation, but I would just like more ideas about how can we encourage people to feel confident to come forward to innovate.
Yeah, it's a good question. The answer to that question from my perspective is really all about culture. All right, and it's really all about, in places where the culture is at its strongest, it's defined who's doing what, and it's also a much more open place where people can come forward with ideas. I think part of your question is touching at the territory between professional and lay, and that again I think speaks to speak to culture. But I think the other point that your question touches on is really around this notion of what are we doing with our time at board meetings, at committee meetings, and how is that best being, is it best being utilized? And the reality is that I think in most boards all around the country, not just in JCCs, there are only three worlds that you can live in. You can live in the operational world, the strategic world, or the generative world. And most boards still live in the operational world. And therefore, when new ideas and new thinking comes up, there's just no space or room for it. So, there's a very practical suggestion I have of actually creating room for it in agendas, and in thoughts, because the surfacing of ideas and the surfacing of these types of things don't just belong in the realm of the professional staff or in the realm of the board, right? I would hazard a guess that in any JCC, the best ideas are actually going to come from the users. Right? And that goes back to, can we test something? Can we get feedback? So it's really about creating a culture whereby ideas are welcomed, that thinking is welcomed, that it's actually, and you can only do that when your organization has a strong core.
Good afternoon. I'm John Rios from Atlantic County, New Jersey. And Barry, you scared me a little bit as a Starbucks shareholder about the lack of people in this. I'm fearful that the web and the internet is the new community and the town square. Should we be embracing it or challenging it? Like both your opinion and Lisa's opinion also.
I think we should be embracing it because it's a tidal wave and there's, you might as well ride the wave instead of trying to fight it. And I think there are many, many creative ways that we can be part of the digital age and to bring our offerings not only outside the building, but also online, and find ways to create community online and stream what's going on inside the building so other people can access it. Having said that, I do, my husband's in the business, in the software business, and I do worry about the impact especially on the younger generation of living online all the time. And I think it is why there's so many mental health challenges. I think it's why people crave community so much and why people want to be in person in relationship with each other. So I just don't accept dichotomous thinking. I think we need to see how we can leverage the digital world to create connections in community, but I also think it's all the more reason why we need to get people in person, really connecting with each other, making them feel like they belong and they're in relationship with each other, and that people are at the center of having real human connections and real human relationships and real human conversations in person.
Can I just add
Please.
one thing? I mean, it's a great question. It's undoubtedly not an either or. It's a both and. The opportunity for real connection is exponentially growing the more digital stuff we do, right? And that gap is getting bigger, but the opportunity is massive. Even this conversation, right? We could have done this several ways. Lisa and I could have been on the other end of the phone, right? We could have been here by video, but we know that nothing will ever in the history of mankind, in my opinion, compare to this. Body language, get to see, get to look. I mean, there's just nothing. So the opportunity, it is about embracing and running with it when it is utilized. But there's something about this personal connection where I think every day that goes by, we're getting to a tipping point where we're going to have to, where we need to embrace it and people will realize it. And I think this is a Gretzky moment for the JCC movement. This is, you guys could skate where the puck's going to be. You already have skated where the puck's going to be, right? Now there's a real opportunity to actually double down on it.
Rick Nelson, Richmond, Virginia. Welcome home, Barry. My question is for each of you. Most of the grants that we have to apply for require significant outcome data. Could you tell us maybe one of the leading grants that you've given recently and what the significant change took place and how the data showed that?
The first one that comes to mind, and it's a big partner of the JCCs, is BBYO. We have been investing in the reinvention and growth of BBYO, and we give them room to experiment and to pilot new things. Going to a previous question, but we also are very data-driven. The Schusterman family always wanted to be known as the good housekeeping seal of approval. And if we invested in a project, that others could know that we did the due diligence and we had the impacts information and we had the metrics to show that there was a good return on the investment. And BBYO is one where we made a major general operating support, multi-year gift, which I think is the best practice for allowing people to take risk and grow. But it's also very metrics focused on how many people are being reached, what is the impact on the teens, how are we building globally and locally. So it's a balance of giving an organization a huge amount of leeway to achieve strategic growth in any way that they think it matters, but also to have clear outcomes on which they're measuring themselves. And that's not just for us, that's actually for the organization's benefit primarily. If they know essentially where they want to go and how they're going to know if they're successful, they're going to get there a lot better. And we don't mind if they change it along the way, if circumstances change, but it's really sort of more of a roadmap for our partners to figure out, am I driving in the right direction, and how am I going to get there in a way that's really going to be impactful for the people I'm serving?
I'll just answer, I won't give you an example, right? But I'll just say that I think that philanthropy, it's different for different grantees, and we haven't done a good enough job of doing that. And I think the way that philanthropy has positioned itself by and large is if the grantees are on the ground floor doing the work day to day, philanthropy is being up on the 40th store, the penthouse. And I think there's this kind of new wave of philanthropy that says it's freaking ridiculous being up in the 40th floor, giving all these outcomes and whatever. Let's get down to the first floor. We understand there's always this little bit of a power dynamic. I get it, but let's make that as small as possible. Let's make it 51-49, and let's reach down and talk to one another and look up and talk to and say, is this the right measurement? Is this the right outcome? Is it quality? Is it quantity? Is it both? I think there needs to be a much more tailored approach to each individual grantee. And I think it's one of the things that I think Lisa and the Schusterman people do well. We're trying to do it. We're trying to do it better. There isn't a one-size-fits-all answer to it.
Before we close, events like this are celebrations of the Jewish community and celebrations of Jewish life, but we can't allow celebrations to pass without taking stock of events that are taking place around us. And I know most of us have caught up with the terribly tragic news about the death of Rabbi Aaron Pankin, the president of the Hebrew Union College. I know that both of you were together with Rabbi Pankin recently And I didn't want to let the moment pass without inviting you perhaps to share a few words about him and about the gap, the hole that he's going to leave, not just in the reform movement, but in the landscape of Jewish life on this continent.
He was a light. He was really just filled with wisdom and wit, mensch of, unparalleled proportions. Just the most caring, giving, but also learned and human person. And his relationship with his wife, Lisa, was just beautiful. And I'm just devastated for her and her family. And he really was a gift to the Jewish people, and he will be very sorely missed.
One of the great privileges that I have in my job is I get to, meet with some amazing people, and Aaron was, right up at the top. I mean, I just simply say, the world lost a really, really good person the other day. Really, really good, a very unique individual.
Zechrono livracha, may his memory be a blessing. I have two important responsibilities to carry out before we close this session. First of all, as I'm sitting here, I'm reflecting on the fact that Lisa and I were introduced to one another 3 minutes after I went to UJC. Now we're going back to 2002 or so, which is beginning to feel like a really long time. Barry and I met one another when we were both, and forgive me for casting aspersions on you, Barry, we were both far too young to have been entrusted with the responsibilities that we were entrusted. Barry was the director of Camp Young Judea Midwest. I think he was 13 or 14 years old at the time.
Pretty much.
And I was 6 months older and was the national director of the Young Judea Youth Movement. They were formative times. If you could think that we ever imagined that we would be sitting together with Lisa Eisen on the stage at a JCC Association biennial, it would have been an unthinkable notion. But I want to say on behalf of all of the people that are assembled here, we as a Jewish community are enormously privileged to have the good fortune to have the Jim Joseph Foundation and the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Foundation as allies and partners and cheerleaders and boosters for the extraordinary work that we have to do. And the Jim Joseph and Charles and Lynn Schusterman Foundations are enormously fortunate to have Barry Finestone and Lisa Eisen in such prominent leadership roles.